Okay, well, I want to welcome everyone to this ADU conversation that we're having today. As some of you may recall, back in 2018, we organized a similar event to this. It was in the Victoria Theater, and that was when the first round of state law ADU legislation was in effect, and a lot of property owners and local architects were very curious to understand how this was going to work. So this follow-on event, and we anticipate this conversation will be ongoing as policies change and questions come up that will be relevant to our members and to our attendees today. So we'd like to thank first and foremost the Cornell Collective for being this month's sponsor of AIA and for their generosity and participation in our organization. So thank you, Cornell Collective. I'd like to start by introducing our panel speakers today. And I'll mention them, I believe, in the order that we'll be hearing from them. So we'd like to welcome Jose Ayala, who is with the Housing and Community Development Organization up in Sacramento, the organization that is essentially the interpreter of state law from Sacramento. Then we have Jesse Steele. He's 3 with the County of Santa Barbara. She'll be talking about the recent ordinance that the county has issued when projects are in that jurisdiction. Then we have Rosie Dice, city planner with the city of Santa Barbara. She'll be telling us about the ordinance from the city of Santa Barbara. And complete expertise and backup, we have Brenda Belts, planner with city of Santa Barbara, as well as Eric Swin, the residential plans examiner for the city of Santa Barbara. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Jose and Jesse and Rosie to each give a presentation about what's happening within their jurisdiction. Before we get to that, I'd like to welcome everyone who's an attendee to type any questions they might have in the chat box during this conversation. We have about a 1-hour format. So the first part will be prepared statements, and then the second half will be a series of questions. So please type those in whenever they come to mind, and then we'll get to those for the second half of what we're doing today. And without further ado then, Jose, if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts from the housing and community development point of view.
Yeah, perfect. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate the invite. I know that it was initially sent out to Greg Nicholas, who you all might be a little bit more familiar with. He's our ADU team lead here. So hopefully I could do the topic the equal amount of justice. Let me just go into presenter mode here really quick. Perfect. So I'll go through a couple of items here. State ADU revisions, ADU production, some of the current bills that are still alive in the legislature, and then go through some other considerations. Here are some of the bills, primarily after 2020. We also have that 2021 bill, AB 3182 at the bottom. I won't go through every single one of these, but I'll kind of touch on topics from each of them. So the state ADU revisions really came about as part of the California's housing crisis. ADUs have been identified as an important piece of the solution to the California housing crisis. And some of the bill analysis data from back in 2019 showed that the average cost to build an ADU was $156,000, and 58% of those were rented at below market rate. Again, this is April 2019 data, so it might be a little bit different now. But again, another important piece of the state ADU revisions were removing the potential impediments, so limiting the criteria by which local jurisdictions can limit where ADUs are permitted, clarifying the ministerial approval, eliminating potential to place owner occupancy requirements on ADUs, just to name a few. So I'll get into ADU production, and I'll really compare the 2019 and the 2020 data. That data shows relatively constant ADU production, but in my eyes, that's a little bit skewed due to the COVID pandemic. So we're looking at a drop of maybe 130, 140 ADUs between the 2 years. But again, we're working with the COVID pandemic. Also, a lot of these permitting processes were in person at a time where everything kind of transitioned to online. So we know that that's probably another reason why we see a drop in the numbers. And again, these two numbers are pulled from annual progress reports that are reported to HCD. So in some jurisdictions reported 2019 data and no 2020 data. So that's why we'll see a little bit of, you may see different numbers if you come across different resources. But I think just generally speaking, a lot of the smaller jurisdictions saw their ADU permits increase. And I'll note that the county and the city of Santa Barbara did see their numbers increase from 2019 to 2020. Some of the larger jurisdictions, primarily, the LA's, San Francisco, San Diego, San Jose, and Oakland saw a decrease in permits. Again, I'd probably associate that more so with just the volume of permits, having to deal with the amount of permits coming in at a time where staffing was a little bit difficult. And then firsthand knowledge, looking at housing elements now, we're starting to see an uptick from even the 2020 data. So I believe that at the end of 2021, when we get all the APRs, or next year when we get all the APRs, we'll see a significant increase in ADU production. Here are some of the current bills that are still in play at the legislature. I won't go through them individually, but I'll note that these are subject to change. So I would go to leginfo.com or .org and look at that to see the most current or up-to-date information on these bills here. And then lastly, I'll go through a couple of the other considerations. One is the 60-day approval requirement. That changed in 2020 down from, I believe, 120 days before 2020. So that accelerates the production of these ADUs. And with AB 3182 of 2021, if an application is submitted and it is not acted upon within 60 days, that application is now deemed approved. So I think that's a significant change, even between 2020 and 21. And then just to wrap up the point here, and I think relevant to this conversation is HCD and the Coastal Commission have been working a lot more frequently, especially on the ADU topics. We've been on calls with local district offices, trying to reconcile our both agencies' goals, protecting coastal resources, but also at the same time, trying to solve the housing crisis. So I would imagine and anticipate a lot more interaction between our two agencies as we move forward. And I appreciate the time, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Jose. Now we'll hear from Jesse Steele from the County of Santa Barbara.
Thanks, Ellen. All right. And let me put this in slideshow. There we go. So again, my name is Jessie Steele, and I'm the project manager for our ADU and junior ADU ordinance amendments. So I'm just going to briefly go over where we're at with those ordinances and some of the key changes that were adopted, as well as some permit statistics. So on May 18th of this year, our Board of Supervisors adopted new ADU and junior ADU ordinances, which went into effect in the inland area 30 days after adoption on June 17th. The ordinance for the coastal zone still has to be certified by the Coastal Commission before it can go into effect. So on August 17th, we'll be going to our Board of Supervisors to request authorization to submit our ADU local coastal program amendment to the Coastal Commission. And that certification process by the Coastal Commission typically takes a year or more. So we anticipate that certification and the effective date of the coastal zoning ordinance will likely be late 2022. In accordance with state law, the county's ordinances distinguish between two categories of ADUs. Those that are exempt from local development standards and are instead subject to state development standards, and those that are not exempt from local development standards. And the county informally calls these two categories exempt and non-exempt ADUs for short. These correspond to the city's special and standard ADUs as well, for those of you that are familiar. And to clarify, neither of these two categories of ADUs are exempt from permit requirements, but rather the county's streamlined process still requires applicants to apply for and obtain building permits for all ADUs and junior ADUs. And so within the exempt ADU category, the county's ordinance identify 4 distinct types of exempt ADUs that are subject to only a handful of development standards derived from state law. Non-exempt ADUs, on the other hand, are subject to over a dozen local development standards that are board adopted by ordinance. And then exempt ADUs are permitted within residential or mixed-use zones, while non-exempt ADUs are permitted in any zone that allows single-family dwellings or multifamily dwellings. And there are no restrictions in very high fire hazard zones as there are in the city. As for the number of ADUs allowed on a lot, there may be 1 exempt ADU and 1 junior ADU on a lot containing a single-family dwelling, or potentially multiple exempt ADUs on a lot containing a multifamily dwelling. However, only 1 non-exempt ADU or 1 junior ADU can be allowed per lot. The development standards for exempt ADUs can be found in subsection E of the county's new ADU ordinances, and the standards for non-exempt ADUs can be found in subsection F. All right, so then this slide just has a quick breakdown of some of the major key changes that we made from our previous ADU ordinance to our newly adopted ordinance. And I left out the standards for exempt ADUs because they vary so widely between the 4 different types. So I'm just going to go over the changes to the non-exempt ADU standards and junior ADUs, which are new for us. With regard to height limits, attached ADUs are subject to the principal dwelling height limit, and detached ADUs are now subject to a 16-foot height limit if they're 1-story ADUs, or a 25-foot height limit for 2-story ADUs, which is significantly more than what we allowed in our previous ADU ordinances. And there's no height limit for an ADU conversion or a junior ADU because they're located within existing structures. As for setbacks, ADU conversions are not subject to setbacks, and new construction ADUs are subject to the setbacks of the principal dwelling. Junior ADUs must have side and rear setbacks sufficient for fire and safety purposes and also comply with the front setbacks of the applicable zone. When it comes to parking, ADUs do not have to provide replacement parking spaces for the principal dwelling when such spaces are lost due to the development of an ADU. And new parking spaces for an ADU are only required for new construction detached ADUs under very limited circumstances. For junior ADUs, replacement parking spaces are required, but new parking spaces for the junior ADU are not. And lastly, owner occupancy is required for junior ADUs only, meaning the owner must reside in either the single family dwelling or the junior ADU. And here's a quick snapshot of our building permit data since the effective date of the state ADU laws back on January 1st of 2017. So the county has issued approximately 331 building permits for ADUs and 2 building permits for junior ADUs during that time. We're really happy to see an upward trend each year in ADU development, and we have a lot more coming down the pipeline in 2021 for sure. So we're excited about that as well. I've included some helpful links with resources on our permitting page and also background information and updates on our ordinance progress. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessie. A really quick question for you back to the table of exempt versus non-exempt. I might not be alone in being confused about residential zoning being appropriate for either one. So really, what is the defining difference that allows one to apply exempt versus non-exempt to a given project?
It's a good question. And there is some overlap between the two categories, exempt and non-exempt, and the zones where they're allowed. But our ordinance clearly lists out for both exempt and non-exempt ADUs, the zones in which they're allowed. There's a table for each in our ordinances. And essentially for non-exempt ADUs, we have to allow them anywhere where residential uses are allowed. For the most part. And then for the exempt ADUs, it's a much more narrow range of zones. It has to be a residential or mixed use zone. So there's still quite a few of those, but they're more limited because they're subject to only a handful of standards.
Got it. Great. Thank you. That really helps. All right. Rosie Deisty now to talk about the ADU ordinance in the city of Santa Barbara.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for having me. Let me pull my presentation up. So I'll have a presentation similar to Jesse's, but covering a couple different things. First, I'll start with the status of the city's ADU ordinance since the state law changed. And so we have two zoning ordinances at this time, an inland Title 30 and a coastal Title 28. The inland Title 30 ordinance amendments were adopted in November 2020 and effective in December 2020. And then the coastal ones, similar to the county, are only effective until the Coastal Commission certifies it. So in the meantime, projects in the coastal zone are subject to the state law provisions. We did submit a coastal plan amendment just this month. And then the effective date is a little bit up for, depending on how the Coastal Commission responds. We're actually hoping they would consider it de minimis, which means they can approve it pretty rapidly. It could be as soon as this fall, but as Jesse mentioned, sometimes they take as much as a year. So we don't know yet, but we hopefully will know soon. This slide just shows areas of the city that have either an ADU permit in the process, or they've had their building permit issued, or it's been completed. The C is the completed ones. And this map is available on our website. We update it periodically, and at the end of the presentation, I'll have a link to that website. And then these are our statistics. So I don't have totals here, but I do have at the top, you'll see number of permits per year. So we had a big push in 2018. It's dropped off a little bit since then. I think our 2021 data is as of May 2021. This is also available on the same site that has the map. And this gets updated about quarterly. And then at the bottom, you can see the types of ADUs we're seeing in the city. So the vast majority are people converting existing structures, typically garages. We do have some new and addition type ADUs, and then some that were illegal units that are being converted to legal ADUs. So this is just a really brief summary of our ordinance rules. And as Jesse mentioned, we have standard ADUs and special ADUs. So I think that corresponds to the city's non-exempt and exempt ADUs. So for us, the standard ADUs typically are larger size, and those size maximums and other development standards are defined by the city. Typically, a standard ADU would just be one per lot, and they are subject to some lot coverage standards, including open yard, floor area ratio for accessory buildings, minimum lot size, and things like that. And then our special ADUs are typically smaller, and the type and size of those ADUs are determined by state law. But these are the ADUs where you can get more than one per lot, and they're not subject to those lot coverage standards I just mentioned. Another thing, since Jesse brought it up, and where we differ from the county, is to do with high fire hazard areas. Our city council voted to allow special ADUs are allowed anywhere in the city. It doesn't matter if they're in a high fire hazard area or not, but the standard ADUs are prohibited in what we call, well, in the very high fire hazard severity zone, but is also known as foothill and extreme foothill in the city. So that's one area where we differ from the city. Here I just wanted to highlight some of the resources we have. So the webpage I just mentioned with the statistics and other things is listed there. On that webpage, we do have a video that we held in January 2021 where we had a lot of participants and answered as many questions as we could in the time that we had allocated. We do have a ADU guide informational packet there in the supplemental application and the map that I showed earlier. Just briefly, I wanted to talk about what's in our guide because it's really the best place to start for anyone looking to permit an ADU. We have FAQs in there. We have the zoning rules and lots of details about that. We have our list of administrative design criteria. So these are objective design standards that apply to ADUs. We show the options for one or multiple ADUs for folks. And we also have code tips for submitting a successful application. And then I just wanted to end by highlighting a couple of future work efforts regarding ADUs. We are or want to collect photos of constructed accessory dwelling units. I think we had a notice in your newsletter for that. And here's my email address if you would like to submit any. I only had one architect submit photos, so I'd be happy to take more. And we use them in outreach events. We can post them to our webpage, things like that. We're looking at coordinating with the Coastal Housing Coalition and preparing an expanded guide for the average homeowner who wants to put in an ADU. We'd like some more information about how to design ADUs, how to get your permit, and details about, you know, hiring a contractor and construction costs and things like that. So that's something that's in the works. We also are interested in pursuing potentially some pre-approved plans for ADUs. And that's something where we would love to coordinate with the AIA and the Coastal Housing Coalition on that. So I have a question mark there because I'm not sure where we're going with that, but it's something we're interested in. We also have a couple other items to look at with our housing element update. Per state law, we need to look at programs that would incentivize ADUs that are affordable at affordable rents. So that's something we'll be looking at with the housing element update. And we also are, as directed by, as Planning Commission was interested in this and City Council, is potentially looking at how mixed use projects with commercial space, if they no longer have a use for that commercial space, potentially that could be converted to one or more ADUs, but we need to look at standards of how that would work. So that's something we're looking into in the future. So that concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you very much, Rosie. One of the questions that are top of mind with respect to permitting ADUs in the city is how is the city handling the 60-day approval aspect that the state law is requiring?
Brenda, do you want to take this one since you do the plan checks?
Sure. So when you submit a building permit application, it's assigned an initial time for our first plan check. It depends on what the scope of work is, but that ranges between 10 and 30 days. And if your application was complete, then and all city divisions could sign it off, then your permit would get issued within that 60 days. They're often not complete on the first go round. So then we give a list of corrections until it becomes complete and then sign it off. And that's how that's handled.
Okay, so you're saying the definition of complete is that it's approved, essentially, that the drawings represent an approved set of designs and engineering and so on. That's what constitutes complete.
That's correct. Yeah, it has to meet all the building code requirements in order to be able to be issued.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Then I guess I would lob that question to Jose. Is that your understanding of being deemed complete in 60 days? Was that the state's intent with that language?
I would say so. It's not, I think the 60 days is intended to have, not let these permits drag out over a long period of time. I don't think it's intended to approve or, approve a deficient permit. So I would concur with Brenda's or in the city view of complete.
Okay, so then assuming that one hands in a set of plans that aren't immediately approvable in their original form, then what does that mean? What's the extension period of time, or does that just basically open it up to now it's just going to take as long as it takes?
Yeah, basically the 60 days wouldn't really start counting until we have a set of plans that meets all building code requirements and are ready to be approved. So if they're, for example, sometimes what happens is the recording of the ADU covenant isn't ready yet. We wouldn't hold up issuance for that aspect. So if you had a set of plans that met all code requirements and they were ready to go, we would issue the building permit, and then the ADU covenant could be handled prior to C of O or prior to final inspection on the ADU. So that's kind of an example of something that could happen later, to still meet that 60 days. So the 60 days basically starts when you have a set of plans that meets all code requirements and are ready to be issued.
Got it. Okay, great. Well, we'd love to open up the floor to our attendees' questions. And I believe Cass is going to manage that aspect of our meeting today. So Cass, would you like to share questions that you're seeing in the chat box? And those who haven't yet entered any of those and have questions, please go ahead and enter them, anytime. Sooner the better for us to get to them. And we also would like to set up more of a forum on our website with AIA for questions, so that as they come up, if they don't occur to folks today, that could be sort of an ongoing basis for getting questions answered. So Cass, if you're able to get us rolling, that would be great.
Thank you, Ellen, and thanks to everyone who's here today. The first question I think has just been dealt with. This is the question, what does HCD say about the application being complete? I believe we just addressed that between Jose and Brenda. Also, the second question, same thing, although the question is, what does, quote, act upon, unquote, mean in terms of the 60-day approval? Do one of you want to expand upon that question, the act upon? Or do we feel clear
in the city,
at this point? Go ahead.
In the city, we would consider that making it ready to issue, right? So the city has done its part. We've signed off the plans, we've contacted the applicant, and now it's ready to issue. And then there's, all the stuff the applicant now has to do to actually get it issued, right? Pay the fees and do all that stuff. So ready to issue is us acting on the application.
Okay, any other further comments from any of the panelists on that particular item?
I think we would,
sorry, go ahead, Jose.
No, I would just say we would tend to agree with that and make a determination to us that's acted upon. So I'd agree with what Brenda said.
Mm-hmm. And the county, our process is the same. It's either approval or denial for issuance of the building permit that we consider act upon to be.
Okay, thank you. This next question, it says, can you touch on the idea of architectural plans that are already pre-approved that homeowners can pull from to use for their ADUs? Is that question clear?
Yeah, I can start with this one because I mentioned it as something the city is looking into. What I've seen in a lot of jurisdictions across the state are kind of going one of two ways. Some jurisdictions have purchased plans from architects and they offer them on to ADU applicants basically for free. So they get a pre-approved sort of set of plans that they've vetted and it's a basic floor layout and potentially a style even. Other jurisdictions have done contests or sort of vetted plans from multiple architects, and they offer them where the applicant would still work with the architects to refine those plans, probably at a lower cost because they've been sort of predefined. But some of these cities, I think like City of Los Angeles, continually adds new architect firms and new designs to that process, but they leave it up to the applicant to work with the architect. We're not sure, a lot of our accessory dwelling units, like I said, are conversions of garages. And also we realize every site is different and there's a lot of site specific things that need to be taken into account. So we're not sure the value of having fully pre-approved plans would be for our city, but we do think if people had some layouts to look at and ideas and architectural styles to consider, that could be really helpful.
Yes. And that was kind of to the point that you were making earlier about having some sort of program of pre-approved plans, right?
Yeah. Correct.
Okay.
And so it's not something, we're in the early stages of looking into this, and it'll take some more thought and discussion, but we think there's aspects of it that could be very helpful.
Okay. We also, I'm going to go to this next question, and then there's a couple more here, and then we do have another list of questions that the team kind of came up with in advance of this meeting. So we'll go to those after we finish with these, unless more come in. So the next question is, how are fees assessed for ADU permits? We'd like to hear from both the city and the county. So who would like to take that?
I can go ahead with that one. So state law specifies that there are no development impact fees that are going to be charged for ADUs of less than 750 square feet, and that also would include junior ADUs. But for ADUs of 750 square feet or more, the fees have to be charged in a manner that is proportional in relation to the square footage of the principal dwelling, which we interpret to mean an ADU per square foot has to be charged the same rate as the principal dwelling per square foot. And at this time, a lot of the county's fees are, our planning and development department collects fees on behalf of other county departments and divisions. And at this time, a lot of our departments and divisions have not amended their fee schedules to be compliant with state law. So we have halted collecting those fees, at least for a time, until our departments and divisions bring them up to compliance.
Okay.
I don't know if our process differs much from that, and I'll have to let Brenda or Erica add to that because I'm not involved in day-to-day permits, but I do know the city doesn't have development impact fees that some other jurisdictions have because our infrastructure and our parks and such are already here. We don't collect new fees to fund those things. And I don't know if Brenda or Eric want to add anything to that.
I can just add that the zoning plan check fee is just a flat fee. It's a new unit fee that I think is approximately $500. And then Eric can probably talk about the building permit fees.
So the building permit fees are going to be based on our schedule. And it varies a lot, but generally, since we see so many garage conversions, it's going to be looked at like a remodel. So we have a base fee for a remodel that includes a kitchen and bath up to 300 square feet. The base fee is, I think, $1,934. And there's incidental fees on top of that that are relatively small. And if it's a brand new ADU, it's feed like a brand new house. They're generally small, so we sort of prorate the fee a little bit for a smaller size. Most of what we see, though, are remodels and conversions. So I hope
So
that helps.
would you say what the range is that you're seeing, like the low to the high? What kind of range are you seeing for the ADUs?
Well, yeah, that's a tough one. Most commonly, I think a conversion of a garage is going to end up being all the fees, including zoning, probably going to approach $3,000 or so. And if it's a new structure, it's going to depend on the size. It could be, it could be $18,000 for a new 1,000 square foot ADU. An addition to the home that's going to be an ADU is going to be in between those, but closer to the remodel side, $3,000 or $4,000 probably.
And then up to as high as 18.
Yeah, well, our fee schedule defines a new R3 structure up to 1,000 square feet would be $18,000, I think, and $34. If it's an 800 square foot ADU, then we prorate it. Take the 18,000 times 0.8, and that's the base fee. So those can be rather pricey.
Yes. And Jesse, would you say that this county is similar in that, or are you able to address a range that that the county is dealing with, or?
Yes, I'm not very familiar with all of our building permit fees. It's not handled by my division specifically. However, I do know that for similar to the city, ADU conversions are generally cheaper on the building permit side than brand new structures. When we looked into this with our first round of ADU ordinances a couple of years ago, we did look into how much it would potentially cost to do a simple conversion versus a brand new 800 or 1,200 square foot ADU. And the range with just a hypothetical situation was the lowest around a few $1,000s to at most could be 20,000. I think that might have also included the development impact fees. So depending on your location, the size of the ADU, and whether you're doing a conversion or new construction, the costs can vary widely.
Thank you. Does that also include JADUs, these numbers, or would they even be less?
We haven't run the numbers on junior ADUs. When we were looking at costs a few years ago, it was prior to the state's adoption of the junior ADU laws. So I'm not sure what those figures are.
And Eric and Brenda, what would you say about the junior ADUs?
So on the building and safety side, a junior ADU is generally going to be substantially, well, I shouldn't say substantially, it'd be less than the fees that were quoted earlier. If, for instance, they're using an existing bathroom and all they're doing is putting in an efficiency kitchen, the fee might be in the neighborhood of $600 or so, depending on how much work is involved, how many inspections.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. Then we have a question here. This is for Brenda. Does the 1,250 square foot open yard required for studio ADU? If I'm understanding, that's a Ty, that's your question. I'm not sure if I got that quite right. Does the is that required for a studio ADU? 1,250 open yard.
Yeah, I think I know what he's getting at there. So accessory dwelling units in the city don't require their own open yard, right? They don't require an open yard in addition to the open yard that's already on the property for the primary unit. An ADU can reduce. Am I frozen?
No, we can.
Okay, sorry. My internet went down for a minute. Okay, yeah, so an ADU can reduce the open yard that's required for the primary unit, and that's a range based on the lot size, and that's in our ordinance. And then a special ADU can just eliminate the open yard entirely. So there's kind of a variety of different open yard reductions that are allowed for ADUs, but the ADU itself doesn't require its own open yard. Does that answer that, Ty?
Yeah, so I have this garage conversion detached. One of the plan check correction is call out the 1,250 square feet open yard space.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if this is gonna be the requirement for detached ADU going forward, or?
That might just be just sort of documenting on the site where your open yard is located, kind of like how we ask you to show where the setbacks are, just so that the site plan sort of shows the site conditions. But a garage conversion wouldn't require any new open space. Okay.
So if we don't have 1,250 to begin with, you're not going to ask for modification.
No. You're good. You can convert anything to an ADU. We won't ask for a modification for open yard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much.
Okay.
And then Jesse, is that the same at the county or similar, the way you guys handle it in the county?
The county does not have any open space requirements for ADUs.
Okay. Okay, now sort of on that same topic here, there's a question, let me see where I have to find it here. What is HCD's position on the open yard requirement and the fact it could preclude an ADU, or is it a non-issue because small or special ADUs are not subject to open yard?
Yeah, so there's that provision in state ADU law that says a minimum of 800 square feet. So the open yard requirement doesn't come into play there for those types of ADUs. It could potentially come into play if you want to go a bit above that. But you're pretty much guaranteed 800 square feet. And so that open yard requirement won't be an issue for those ADUs.
Okay. All right. Now we have a question regarding soils. Are there specific requirements or exemptions for when a soils report is needed or not?
Good question.
Take that question.
So the city has in our adopting ordinance basic requirements for soils reports when they're required, and it doesn't change with an ADU. So if it's a brand new detached structure, it requires a soils report regardless of size. If it's an addition to the residence, if it's over 500 square feet or over half the square footage of the house, it requires a soils report. If it's a second story addition, it requires a soils report. A garage conversion does not require a soils report. And we do have a process to go through to waive the requirement for a soils report. The engineer has to get involved and take responsibility for the soils. And there may be instances where that's approvable, and in other areas of Santa Barbara that have known expansive soil and things like that, we wouldn't allow a waiver, but we have allowed some.
Okay. Getting a lot of good questions here. Here's one I think that we haven't touched on, so let's look at this one. Can there please clarify what size triggers school fees in the city and county? And this person had a confirmation that 750 square feet plus triggers it in the city. Is that something you can talk about?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's okay. All right. Here's another interesting one. What if you had a project finish after the changes in the law and was told to pay school fees and now would not have to pay school fees? Is there any going back to get a refund?
So The school district, you'd have to deal with the school district. They're the ones that actually came up with the idea of the 750 square foot and over requiring a school fee. It used to be 500 square feet, and so there are several out there that paid a school fee on that amount. They need to go back to the school fee, and as I understand it, they do offer a refund.
Okay, so you deal with them.
Yeah, it's not a city question really. It's with the school district.
Okay. Now here's another one and I believe that Rosie, I think you may have addressed this. Is there a guideline from the city and the county that summarizes the requirements for a complete ADU submittal? I think you gave a link to where that is, but given the intent of the ADU process to provide a set of prescriptive design criteria for ADU. And I think you addressed that, right?
Yes, like I mentioned, we have our adopted design criteria in the forms that I told you about in there. The link is in the slides, which I believe will be shared with the participants.
Now, Jesse, on the county side, that won't be available, right, until, as you're saying, like 2022? Or do you, what are you providing? What is the county providing in the interim?
The county does not have plans to create a comprehensive ADU guidebook similar to the cities. We simply don't have that in our work program or our budget. But what we do have available to applicants is an ADU and junior ADU permitting page that has some frequently asked questions, lists of supplemental application submittal requirements, and links to our zoning ordinances for planning development standards. However, for a comprehensive set of building code standards, we'd have to refer you to the building code. We don't have anything that gives all of those in one place.
But when you have the final approved adopted ordinance in 2022, hopefully that would have something.
Our coastal zoning ordinance will go into effect once it is certified by the Coastal Commission, and that ordinance will contain the development standards, the planning standards for ADUs in the coastal zone, and that will be published online. But otherwise, we're not going to create a guidebook with any other details or information.
Like the city has. Okay.
Right.
Okay. All right, then moving on here, speaking of the coastal zone, this is another question. Please clarify, in the city and county, can ADU be proposed in the coastal zone? What does coastal certification mean?
Okay, I can start with that. Yes, they can be, and we have been permitting them in the coastal zone all along. Like I said, for now, they are being processed under the provisions that are in state law. Coastal certification means basically for anything in the coastal zone, we have a local coastal plan and we have an implementation plan that Coastal Commission has to basically say, or bless, let's just say, before we can start applying those goals and rules and implementation measures. And that gives us the authority to issue coastal development permits by having those plans approved by the Coastal Commission. And when we change anything that in our previously certified plans, we need to go back to them. They need to review it, and they really pay attention to protection of coastal resources. So they want to look at what we're proposing, make sure we're consistent with our local coastal plan, that we will continue to protect coastal resources. Then they certify it, and then we can start implementing it and issuing coastal development permits based on that, what's in the ordinance.
Thank you.
Cass and Alan, I'm sorry to cut in. We are running out of time. We are 5 minutes away from 1 o'clock. Just
Okay.
a reminder. Thank you.
Okay.
Very good.
There's one here that I think is really, I like to have addressed. Since this is about the 60 days again. So since the time for a permit to be issued for any project Once there are no more corrections, usually it's less than 60 days to get the permit for any project as we're familiar with. So this question from this person, it seems that the 60-day rule doesn't end up speeding things up for ADUs. So it's kind of what's the purpose of the 60 days if you're already, you've already gone through all this time to get complete, and then 60 days is for the actual, pay the checks and issue the permit. Seems like a long time.
I'm happy to take that one. I would say that not all planning and permitting departments are as good as the ones in Santa Barbara. So you'd be surprised that a lot of delays do happen up and down the state. So I would say that the 60 days is geared more towards the bad actors, not necessarily the good actors. So you might not run into that issue here or in the Santa Barbara area, but certainly, you look at other areas, and that 60-day is really a tool that homeowners and applicants use to get their permits through.
I guess I think what the question is, and maybe I don't have this correct, but if you, from the moment that you come in the door and you start the process until you're completely done with the permit, that could be way more than 60 days, right? Once you've gone through all your plan check corrections and everything else, then you're basically done with all the hard work. So the 60 days seems to be, or at least I think many of us understood that was an incentive to try to get through the entire process in 60 days, not just to get through with everything and then be at the end, and then you have 60 days to actually for the permit to be issued once everything is deemed complete. So I think that's the question here, is how is this 60 days really helping to speed things up? I hope that's a fair question.
Yeah, I mean, I can comment on that a little bit. The 60 days is city time, right? We're not going to count the 60 days against you when it's back in your hands and the architect is working on making corrections. So one benefit of the 60 days is that the city won't have it in our hands more than 60 days at a time, right? We're going to make sure to get your corrections out in a shorter time period. It just happens that our estimated time period is already less than 60 days, right? For your initial review, and your resubmittal plan checks are less than 60 days. We also are very aware and cognizant of this expedited review for ADUs. So they're not just thrown in the pile of all other plan checks. We have them separated out to expedite them. We have two dedicated plan check staff over in zoning, myself and Terry, who do nothing but ADU plan checks. They're half our total plan checks in the queue right now are ADUs. So we definitely make an effort to expedite them and take them out of the big pile of all the other plan checks to make sure that they're done within that time period. So if that helps.
Okay, well, obviously much more to talk about. And I think that we've had some, really great questions here. We do have this list of other questions that many of these issues have been addressed in our discussion today. I'm hoping that we can perhaps do another one of these before too long, because I think there's a lot to talk about. And with that, I guess I'll hand it back over to Ellen to conclude the meeting on time for everyone. But thank you, everyone, for your questions, and to everyone for the answers and the discussion. So important.
Yes, agreed. Well, thank you to all of you for your participation in the meeting today and helping to clarify, a couple aspects of ADU applications that I know that probably most people who are attending today have been, dealing with and thinking about and seeking understanding about. Just maybe if there's one final question, Jose, just the, kind of what was the motivation for the revision in state law, and what was the state seeing as the need to review ADU law again? And if in your review of our local ordinances, are you seeing, how do you see those relative to other jurisdictions and ordinances that they've created?
Right, so kind of going back to front on that one, I don't think I've reviewed the cities and counties ordinance, so can't necessarily speak to that. But seeing the permit numbers, I think, that's evidence in and of itself that, they're working in Santa Barbara. To get to the motivation, again, the legislature is the one who ultimately crafts the bills that end up being the state ADU law. But again, I would probably hit back on the housing crisis and, ADUs being a tool in the chest. I know that we also have that question regarding if ADUs are meeting their goals, and I would say that they are as a housing option. And you're not going to get 3.5 million ADUs up and down the state. I don't think that's the intent of the revisions to state ADU law, but certainly a piece of the puzzle to help solve the housing crisis.
Great. Well, great. Well, with that, again, I thank you all for your participation, and I think seeing this from a multiple points of view, jurisdiction-wise, is really enlightening and helpful to understand. Again, thank you to Cornell Collective for being our sponsor this month, and we encourage everyone to keep working on ADUs and send questions to the AIA as they come up, or directly to the city or county to get any of your questions resolved. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.